Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Pushing Cardboard. I'm Grant Linneberg, your pusher, I guess. I'd like to thank everybody who listened to the first episode. We had over 200 downloads in the first week, which wildly exceeded my expectations. I had no idea who'd be out there listening. So thanks for everybody who listened to the first episode. And thanks for coming back for number 2. And if you're just joining us, number 1's still back there on the web. Pick it up. A few things I'd like to talk about before we get into the meat of today's episode. I got a little feedback on that first episode. A user from BGG Grognads asked me if I might make a list of what's upcoming and keep people posted and let people talk about what I'm thinking about podcasting about. I'm still mulling that one over. I'm not sure that I might have a few ideas that I don't really want to commit to, nor do I probably want to open things up to a discussion of what I ought or ought not to discuss on the podcast. So I may yet do that, but I'm not quite sure. I also got another question about how do I manage to do so much PBM all at the same time. I usually have anywhere between 8 and 15 PBEM games going at once, all mostly using Vassal, sometimes using one of the Board Game Arena or one of the other online game simulators that allow for asynchronous play. I guess the reason I'm able to do so many is a lot of it is things like games from the Commands and Colors family, where you can knock out a turn in 3 to 5 minutes, and if you're using Dropbox, you read and write the file directly from Dropbox to Dropbox. So there's no file manipulation, there's no emailing. It's very quick to do. Games that take a little longer thought to do a turn, like a big game like the U.S. Civil War or something like that, then I maybe only get a turn out once every 2 or 3 days for those, because I need to be able to sit down and have a good 20 minutes to half an hour to have a look at what I'm going to do with my turn. But yeah, I guess I play a lot of games that where you can bang out a turn quickly, and plus it's my main method of opposed play these days. So I put aside some time for it. As for what I've been up to lately, I think the most fun I've had since last I spoke was I took in the San Diego HistCon online convention. It was great fun. It was like $10 to register for the whole thing, and I took in a bunch of talks or playthroughs or just chat fests. Most of it was run through Discord. There was a few things where it broke out in where you needed Zoom or I guess a couple of things ran on live YouTube. But for the most part, it was all on Discord, and I had a great time. Some of the things I took in was they had demos from all of the Zenobia Award finalists, and I went to one for a game called Molly House by Joseph Kelly. I couldn't stay for the whole show here, but I really wanted to see how this game about LGBTQ rights in the early 1700s in London would work. It looks great. I hope he finds a publisher. It seems like the sort of thing that Hollenspiel would do well. It's off the beaten track, but a really interesting game. I went to a demo of Kursk, The Tigers Are Burning, 1943. This was a demo of a magazine game from C3I that's getting the deluxe box treatment. It's a really fun system. Plays in an evening. It's pretty, it's like probably 3 or 4 hours, or maybe a little less once you knew the system well. The session was hosted by Pat Mulvihill and designer Trevor Bender. They had a great chat explaining design decisions, open to lots of questions, which really helped, and as well as a bit on strategies and tactics. And then anyone who wanted to play got paired up, and I had to go at that game later on and managed to win my match by a single point playing the Germans. So that was really fun. I watched a live demo of Thunder at Dawn. That's Revolution Games. That's the Blind Sword system, their latest title in that series. Roger Miller from Revolution Games gave a great demo of this game and system just by simply soloing the game on Vassal and answering questions along the way. As I'd recently taken advantage of Revolution's fall sale to buy a few of these titles on the Blind Sword system, it was just the introduction to the strategy that I needed. It was great. I look forward to playing somebody with that play on Vassal PBM on one of the games in that system, maybe an earlier one. Similarly, I watched a demo and talk about This War Without an Enemy, published by Nuts Publishing. Designer Scott Moore gave a demo of this block game. It was a great session. We were encouraged to ask questions, so we managed to not just get the nuts and bolts, but a lot of design decisions along the way. And having a couple of Brits in the crowd meant there were plenty of well-informed questions from the history angle that me as a Canuck, I wouldn't have been... I guess I'm just not that up on British Civil War history. It was great. It's a beautiful game. I can't wait to play more of it. I saw a demo of Almoravid. Designer Volko Runke and Vassal designer Brian Reynolds showed off the new in development module for this new Levian campaign series game. This was kind of a demo because they were kind of showing off Almoravid the game and showing off the improvements that Brian Reynolds has made to the Vassal module compared to what they'd managed to do with the previous game, Nevsky. The improvements in the Vassal module are mostly things that may seem small to the player, but they really open up the possibilities for Vassal module designers. And as well, I got to ask a fair number of questions related to the future of Vassal as a PBM platform. So that felt good, and it felt like the future's bright for Vassal PBEM. That was probably all that's probably all the big things I took in. I also, went to the Coffee with Harold and sessions, and I watched a couple of things later after the con was over, and I had a great time. There was always people hanging around in the chat boxes around when they weren't in watching a demo or something. So I met lots of people, and just kind of felt like had a bit of social interaction with my wargaming, which it's been a while since I've had that, that's for sure. As for what I've been playing lately, on the PBEM front, it's pretty much the same stuff as last episode. A lot of commands and colors with Ancients, Napoleon, Tricorn, and Samurai. Those are all still ongoing. 2 ASL scenarios. One is in its final turn, and then another one where I just got my setup from my opponent for that, and now I have to plan my attack. My game of Unhappy King Charles still goes along. I think I'm not going to lose as badly to Wendell this time as I did last time, but man, he knows this game well. Last 100 Yards, that's still going well. Wilderness War, just about wrapped up there. Bayonets and Tomahawks. We're into the second year of the third scenario, which is a 2-year scenario. Really fun. I'm hanging on. We'll see how it goes. Nemesis Burma, 1944. That's still going. I feel again in that one that I'm a little behind, but my opponent, who's playing the Japanese, has tried for 3 turns now to get into Imphal, and he hasn't managed to. So I take a little bit of a little comfort that I've managed to hold him out of there, but it still feels like I've got my back against the wall in that one. Imperial Struggle, we are into the 3rd turn with that, and it gets smoother every turn. And then the 2 things that I played in the last while that weren't Vassal PBEM were, of course, I played the online Vassal Battle for Kursk game, and that was really fun. The module there worked great, no problems at all. We had a great time with that. And then out on my actual in real life table, I've got Absolute War out on the table. So I've been playing that solo just just pushing the pieces around so I can teach myself the system, and that's going great. I think that's that game deserves all the attention it's getting right now. Okay, this episode I'd like to talk about a couple of East Front games. I'll talk about Absolute War later, but first I want to talk about an older, simpler game, not that much older, but a bit. I want to talk about Holdfast Russia, 1941-42, game that came out in 2014 from Worthington Publishing, designers Grant Wiley and Mike Wiley, which I think that is who Worthington Publishing is, with the artist Sean Cook. This is a fairly straightforward, easy to learn and easy to play game. It's strategic scale. The units are armies. It's a block game. It's got the full fog of war where the blocks are stickered on a single side, so you can't tell what units you're going up against or what their strength points are until you get into combat with them. It's a simple combat system, really easy to learn. The bones of the game are basically each player gets usually 16 resource points each turn. There's a couple of times where one side or the other will get a bonus, like the Germans will get a resource point bump for a fall blow at some point and things like that. But mostly it's 16 RPs for each player each turn. And these can be spent on replacements, but you also have to spend them for each unit you activate for movement and each unit for each combat that you designate. The movement combat is interesting in that you can move and then initiate combat with a unit, or you could initiate combat, resolve that combat with that unit, and then move. Combat's fairly simple. Each unit type has its own number of dice and the numbers that they hit on. So you might roll 4 dice, but only hit on 6s, or roll 3 dice and hit on 5s and 6s. And then, of course, each unit also has a number of hits it can take before it's eliminated. Where you just rotate the blocks to show how many hit points it has left, which of course can be bought back up with the resource points at the beginning of your turn. So it's pretty simple movement and combat. There's a terrain effects chart to tell you how many movement points for the different types of terrain, and there's a weather roll each turn because, of course, this being the East Front, the weather's going to play a big part of the game. Victory's very straightforward. Victory depends on the Germans taking 2 out of the 3 cities of Moscow, Stalingrad, and Leningrad. So it's a really straightforward, fast-moving game. You could play this once or twice in an evening, probably. Well, probably once. It's not that quick, but it's once you got the hang of it, it really flies. I really enjoyed this game when I first got it. I found it terrific. It played well on play by email. All that was great. But I will say that after I'd played 6 or 7 games of it, I started to feel like maybe the options or the different strategies were beginning to run out. I wasn't sure how many more different ways I could attack with the Germans and throw my opponent off the scent. The game the game I am talking about is Holdfast Russia. They replaced it by a larger edition called Holdfast East Front a couple years later. That game has they expanded the time frame so that it goes beyond just 41 and 42. But I had that game as well. I ended up selling it on because I didn't think they did a good job with the bigger expanded version. It has the longer time frame, but there was no changes to the resource point allocation. So, in the second half of the war in the East, when the Russians start to really ramp up their production and start pushing the Germans back, there's no change to the resource point allocation that would indicate that in this game. It just feels like all they really did was make a longer time track, and that was about it. I don't think there was any other new units that come in later. If you can get your hands on a copy of the Holdfast Russia version, that's the one I'd get. The Holdfast East Front, you can play the simple, the Holdfast Russia version, no problem. But I don't think you're getting anything extra for getting the bigger box with the longer time frame. Still, the original is a great intro to East Front wargaming, and the Vassal mod 2.2 by Judd Vance works great. It's got a bit of automation in it, which helps, and it's a pretty straightforward game. The module worked great. I played all my games of this via PBEM, and it worked really well. So check it out. Okay, now onto a newer game on the East Front. Let's talk about Absolute War, a new game from GMT designed by Carl Paradis with art by Charles Kibler, Ilya Kudryashov, and Carl Paradis. Carl is no stranger to East Front games. His No Retreat series started with No Retreat East Front or No Retreat Russia, whatever it was called, and then he went on to make a bunch of other No Retreat games. But so it was a bit surprising to see him want to come back to the East Front. But apparently Carl wanted to try and slim down and cut away any excess and get to the real heart of the conflict. Carl's a real big one for as few counters and as few fiddly things around on a game as possible. So this is really interesting. I think a lot of people are checking out this game right now, so I'm going to try and give a little bit of a overview of how it all works. I've only played it solo so far and not all the way through yet, so I have no point of view on what the balance or what the overall feel is like, but I want to try and give you a taste of sort of what the game might be like if you're on the fence about whether this is for you. This is an area movement game, whereas the No Retreat series was hex encounter style. This is area movement. Units are generally armies and fronts with a few smaller units added in, and the counter density here it's extraordinary. Carl's got it down to the Germans have 34 units total, and the Russians have 54, including a few pieces that replace other pieces. And then there's a one sheet of markers that for marking units that are disrupted or what have you. There's very few counters when you think of some of the other East Front games you might have played that are just have hundreds and hundreds of counters. So this was very interesting. It's he also decided to go with no dice. There's cards in this game, and the cards are used both for events, but there's also other things along the bottom of the cards. So the cards are used for combat resolution. There's no dice, no old-fashioned CRT. Although one might argue that the cards work as just a different way to express a CRT, but that's all very new, and he streamlined the rules so that the game has very few exceptions to rules. So there's not a lot of this is the way you do it, except in this case, in this case, in this case. It's just a lot of this is the way you do it. That said, you've got to kind of wrap your brain around a lot of new ways of doing things. The map's lovely. The GMT, your standard GMT mounted map. Stacking in this game, even though it's an area game, it's very modest. Each area can only have 2 stacks of 2 large units per area, plus a couple of subunits. You can have one smaller unit or an air unit in there. But you can have 2 stacks of 2 large units per area, and that's if the area is contested, that means 1 stack each. It's 2 stacks, period. It's not 2 stacks each. So this is not. I don't even know if you'll need your tweezers for this one. You can see what's on the counters and get at them. The card resolution for combat, it works pretty much like dice on a CRT, but it's not odds based in any way. There's sort of two main. There's two styles of combat. There's battles and assaults, and whether you're in a battle or an assault depends 100% on what terrain you're attacking into. If it's open terrain or even a forest, generally it's a straight ahead battle. Whereas if it's in more mixed terrain or a city, you're going to have to do an assault. For the cards, each player has their own deck, 2 decks really. Each player has their own event deck, which is fairly large, and then a smaller offensive decks. And each turn you'll get a bit of you get a bunch of event cards and 1 offensive card each turn. There's a lot of little subsystems in this game, and they all sort of interwork together. There's a thing he calls war status points, and that ties directly into the victory conditions. For you'll score status points every time you can eliminate one of his large units. You'll score status points for taking major cities. Each turn you'll also have 1 or 2 objectives, and if you manage to secure those objectives on this turn or already have secured those objectives, you'll get status points for those as well. There's resource points, and you need resource points to rebuild units and things like that. And resource points can also be bought with cards. So if you can discard cards to increase your resource points. You've got combat markers that can be used or spent, and the combat markers includes markers for things like attacks, support, or there's also markers for armored or mobile advances. And there's a fixed number of these counters that each side gets, and you can only attack as many times as you have attack chits, or you can only designate as many support stacks as you have support chits. That becomes more important as the battle heats up. There's a very important concept called war initiative, and it can turn in the January-February phase of each turn. So whoever's basically driving the play has the war initiative. Every once in a while, early on, the Germans will have it in the early going in general, and the Russians will have it in the late going in general. Although whenever extreme winter hits, the Russians get it for that turn no matter what, and that'll happen every once in a while as well. There's of course weather and terrain effects make a big impact in this game. The weather is predetermined. The weather it's not a roll and find out what the weather is type of game. The weather is predetermined along the turn track. And then one other little subsystem he has. He's got if all the conditions are right and you're attacking with armor and you're doing a major offensive and everything, and you're in open ground, you can try for a pincer attack. And if you manage to successfully attack using the pincer attack, you make a pocket. And if you manage to hold that pocket till the end of your turn, or you're into your next turn, I think it is, you'll get a war status point for that as well. So a lot of little subsystems that all kind of intertwine, and some of them have some new ideas that we haven't seen before. The sequence of play, I'll kind of go through that because that'll give you an idea of how the game works. At the beginning of each turn, you check for there's an event or two for every date, and they always have some kind of a little effect. So you run through the event or events, and then you check the war initiative. Just make sure to see who has the initiative if it's the beginning of the beginning of the year, or check to see if it's extreme winter, in which case the Soviets automatically get it. And then then we have 2 player turns, and the player turns have their own sort of longer sequence. The German always goes first, regardless of who has the war initiative. In the player turn, you have a supply phase, which is fairly standard. A combat marker phase, where you get all your combat markers back, that being all the attack markers and the support markers and the armored markers, etc. And then you the card phase, where you draw 4 event cards and 1 offensive card, and then you have to discard down to 6 total cards. You can keep as many offensive cards as you want, keep as many event cards as you want, but you can only have 6 cards total. The offensive cards, they're important in that they are how you are able to mount major offensives, and they're your best chance to get your opportunity to do these pincer attacks and create pockets. But of course, if you're getting 4 cards and 1 offensive card every turn, you may end up with more than you need, and to discard down to 6 total. For every card you discard and don't use, you'll get a resource point up to a max. The Germans can only ever have a maximum of 4 resource points, and the German 6. Feels like very little, but it seems to work out. After the card phase, it's the strategic phase, where you can upgrade your units, you can bring on the reinforcements off the turn track, or spend money on replacements or reserves. And finally, you declare if you have an offensive card you want to use, or more than one. Each offensive card tells you how many major offensives you get. Sometimes you get 2 or 3. You can declare your offensives at this time. After that, it's the movement phase, and the movement it's pretty much like most games you will have played. There's terrain effects charts and weather effects for the moves, but other than that, it's you can't move into your opponent's areas. You have to attack into them, so you move adjacent, and then once you've moved everybody, it's the combat phase. As I mentioned earlier, there's 2 types of combat. There's the more straightforward, just called battle, where it compares the strength of the attacker and his supports versus the defender and his supports, and then you draw a result card from the attacker's deck, and there's a little chart across the bottom of each card, and it goes from, I think, -2 through +6, and you just compare the differential in strength points. Say the attacker had 6 and the defender had 3. You'd look under the +3 column, and it would give you the battle result for that card. And the battle results are the sort of things you might attacker advances, or defender eliminated, or defender retreats 1, whatever. But the key here is that under the +3 on all those different cards, it's going to be different on each card. So that's how he's kind of turned a CRT into a card deck into a rolling the dice for a CRT. That and it works really well. The assault combat type is a little different. The attacker strength plus his support, and then he draws a card, and in a different section of the card, it'll say whether he gets extra or less attacking points. The defender, he adds up his strength plus any supports he has, and he also draws a card from his deck, and again adds extra hits or loses hits. And then you compare the 2 of those, and you're going to see one will be higher than the other. Generally, the attacker should be higher, but it's not a done deal. And then there's a little chart on the play that tells you based on if it's basically a standoff, or if it's +2 or +4. Either way, it tells you what to do and who has to retreat, or who gets to advance. In general, the attacker in both battles and assaults has an easier time supporting his attack. You can support from adjacent areas fairly easily, whereas the defender can only support from his own area. So if he has two stacks, one is the defender stack, and the other stack can support. There's a few little tweaks around this. For example, a lot of the major cities are like a hex within the edge of an area, and anybody in a city can help defend the area adjacent to the city, things like that. But generally, the attacker has more chance for supports than the defender has. The support units. There's also the attacker can add in some air support, and each player can also play one card as a support. That well, at least in a battle. I'm not sure about the assault. So anyway, once the battle is resolved, if the defender has had to retreat or lose some units and retreat, they do that. If the attacker gets to move in, depending on the terrain, and if he has armored units, he may be able to play one of those pincer markers and declare it a pincer attack. There's a little list of what you need to be on a major offensive, and you need to be only in certain types of terrain. You need to have an armored unit, and you need to be attacking from. You need to have support from an adjacent unit so that the attack's coming from two different directions. Anyway, if all that worked out, then you could have played your pincer attack, and if it's successful, you get to create a pocket, which is going to help you generate more war status points later on. It also means, of course, if you manage to create a pocket, that will give him no chance to retreat. That's combat in a nutshell. It's the trickiest part of the game to wrap your head around, but it becomes more fluid the more you do it. After that, there's a reserve phase where you can bring some of your units that are in the reserve section of the edge of the board onto the board. It costs you some. It's interesting. You have to pay combat markers. So not only do you use those combat markers, the attack and support markers for your combats, but you can also spend them to bring these units from the reserve track onto the playing field. Like his other games, like Carl's other games, there's units can be shattered or destroyed or captured, and each one it costs more and differently to bring those units into reserve. Each turn, the units come out of shattered for free into reserve, whereas it costs more to bring the units out of, say, destroyed and into reserve, and it costs a lot more to bring units out of captured. But anyway, that's the reserves phase. Then there's a used marker phase where you gather up all the attack markers you used and all the support markers you used, and you bring off all the disruptive markers, and you put them in you don't put them back so you can use them again because they're used, but they're just not on the board anymore, because you want to save a few combat markers if you were the Germans here to have, so that you have some especially support markers for in case the Russian attacks you. You want to be able to put up some support markers in defense. When it's the very start of your turn, you get to bring all your markers back to the unused side. So in this phase, you just bring them from the board to your, basically what we would call your used pile. And then there's the objective phase, where you score any war status points for the cities you took or the units you managed to destroy. And also, each player, once per turn, they have a goal. They draw a card which they keep face down in front of them each turn, and it has a couple of cities or areas that are goals for this turn. And at the end of your turn, you flip that over, and if you manage to capture or hold the first one and then the second one, you'll get 1 or 2 war status points for that as well. You discard that and draw a new one and keep it face down so your opponent doesn't know. So that's the German player turn. Then the Russian player repeats that same sequence of play and does their turn, and that's one whole turn. The combat markers are an interesting thing in that that they're limited to how many you have. Sometimes you actually, during the game, you might even lose some due to events that happen just along the turn track. You use them on attacking, you use them for defense, you use them to spend for moving units from reserve to onboard. So there's a lot going on with those combat markers. They're a finite resource that that I have a feeling it's going to be the key to kind of making this game, to being successful at this game. There's, in terms of how to win, there's, of course, sudden death victory conditions for both sides. If you can get your war status track up to 19 and your opponent down to 0, plus you control a couple of key cities, you'll win automatically. But that's both there. That works for either side. The Russians can get an early victory or a victory at any time just by taking Berlin. Difficult thing to do, I'm sure, but that's an automatic victory. But if neither player gets the early victory, then there's endgame victory conditions. The game ends on turn 22. The Soviet will win if on game turn 22 they still own all Soviet areas. He will win. On game turn 22, if the German has captured all 6 of his war aim sites, these are specific cities or areas in Russia that are designated as the German goals, then he'll win. But if neither has done that on game turn 22, you continue on till game turn 26. Of course, by this time, the Russians are pushing back pretty good. So by turn 26, if the German controls his 2 production sites, there's a couple of kind of factory sites for the German. If he manages to still control both of his production sites, he'll win. And for the Soviet to win on game turn 26, he needs to have taken Berlin. So lots of different ways to win. I have a feeling this game, there's going to be some early victories happening as I learn it, but we'll see. You can kind of tell by the victory conditions that the game expects you the push all the way to Moscow for the Germans to try to win in the first half of the game, and then a push back all the way to the Berlin for the Russians to try to win in the end game. And I hope that mechanic works. I really appreciate that the victory conditions encourage both sides to push sort of in a historical way. I get frustrated with North Africa games that don't have that push back and forth built in that historically happened. There should be some real incentives for sides to push in historic ways, and I think with these victory conditions, that's built in. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing if that all works. I don't have many quibbles about this game from what I've seen of it so far. I'm excited to learn more about it, and I'm really excited to play it with someone. I think the only thing that I've found that I thought was a little disingenuous is the game comes with a little 4-page basic game. It's you get a big rule book, you get a big playbook, and then there's this little 4-page basic game. And when I first got the game, I went, "Oh, great! Look at that! A little 4-page. I can learn the basic game quick, teach myself that, and then I'll move on to the real game." That's it's always a great way to learn a game. But the very first instruction on that first page of the 4 pages of rules, it says, read the first 7 pages of the main rules and then come back to this. So it feels like, I don't know, I just kind of went, this might be a chopped down version of the game, but it's not a quick 4-pager that it's kind of presenting itself as. I played about 4 or 5 turns of the basic game, and then I just reset up and moved on to the main game and started teaching myself that, because it just seemed, I didn't think I was going to get much out of the basic game. I wanted to get right into the whole thing. Normally, I like to talk about how good the Vassal module is, but of course, I haven't played this via Vassal yet, so I don't know. I'll give a full Vassal review for this game when I finally do manage to play it via PBEM or even live, however that works. But until then, I'm excited to try this game, and I'm sure everybody's either heard about it or has been already knocking the counters around themselves. All right. Up next, I'd like to talk about something that I've been just a brief review of another podcast or video or something I might have seen that's come across my way or I've been thinking about lately. And this week I want to talk about Battles magazine. I know probably lots of you are already subscribers to Battles magazine, but if you're not, I heartily encourage it. I got my first issue of Battles magazine last year, and I just thought, oh my God, this is my new favorite wargaming magazine. It's not that I don't like the other ones, but this one just rocketed to the top of my charts. I love the layout. It's easy to read. It's easy on the eyes. There's no excessive use of type over top of photos, which can get to be hard to read. There's lots of white space, which, I don't know, it just makes the magazine easier. And it's just chock full there. Apparently it has a very erratic publishing schedule, not even one magazine every year from as far as I can determine. So I guess that means by the time he gets the next one out, there's always a ton of content for him to include. But I just love this magazine. It's got a ton of reviews, and like real, not the sort of reviews you'll come across on BGG or little half-page reviews that are, I liked it, I didn't like it. There's really well-reasoned, well-thought-of reviews. There was in the most recent issue that I had, which is it includes the game Storm Over Madrid. There was a review, I think it was of Brazen Chariots by David Hughes, and it's just a fantastic review, whether you agree with his conclusions or not. He's put a lot of thought into his propositions, and he's obviously knowledgeable about the subject. I can't stress enough how good the writing is in this magazine, and how good it looks. I like C3I, for example, and it looks pretty good too. But it's all a little busy for me sometimes. I like something about Battles magazine just feels more direct, more to the point, and a little bit more easy on the eyes. So order yourself up a Battles magazine if you haven't already. Finally, for my final words this week, let's talk about maps and counters and the evolution of same. Okay, so there's no hiding the fact that I'm on the aging end of the wargamer spectrum. I started wargaming as a teenager in the mid-70s. But I still like the old maps and counters. I know they get a lot of flack from younger gamers, I suppose, that have crossed over from Euro games, or just people who are really for whom components mean a lot. I get it. I get that the quality of publishing has advanced in the last 40 years, and great things are now possible. But for me, clarity and function are more important than form or razzle dazzle. I admit I'd love to see some larger fonts on some of those old 2-color counters from the 70s and 80s. My eyes aren't what they were, but some new counters are so busy with so many colors on a single unit, I get dizzy just looking at it. And as for maps, I know a lot of young gamers look at older maps like the one from the Russian campaign, and they just think it looks like a big piece of white paper with a hex grid and a few lines scribbled on it. They decry its sparseness. But I'd argue that at least it's completely functional. Some of my newer maps, they've got so much art on them, I have trouble picking out key things like borders and roads. So I guess let's, of course, there's designers like Kim Kanger that show us you can have beautiful components that are perfectly functional. Any of my counters and maps by Kim Kanger, they're better than all my old ones and all my other new ones. He just has a way of doing it. And he's not the only one, I suppose. But I guess I'm just saying that if I have to choose, I'll take function over form every time. I want to be able to play the game without squinting to try and figure out what I'm looking at. Anyway, thanks for listening to another episode of Pushing Cardboard. I'm Grant Linneberg, and you can find me at pushingcardboard.com or on Twitter @cardboardpusher. If you've enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to spread the word, tell your friends, your buddies, your gaming partners. I'll have another episode out in 3 or 4 weeks. Until then, I'll see you online.